The red warning lights bathed the council chamber in bloody shadows as Commander Loktar studied the holographic display floating before him. 12 destroyed enforcement stations, 4 liberated prison worlds, 27 damaged supply convoys, all the work of one human pilot in a single modified corvette. The numbers made no sense, yet the evidence hung there in glowing red markers across the star map like drops of spilled blood. "Impossible," muttered Admiral Vorth from across the circular table. The old warrior's scales had lost their shine years ago, but his reputation for crushing rebellions remained intact. One ship cannot cause this much damage. There must be a fleet hiding somewhere. Loktar zoomed in on the attack patterns. Each strike showed the same signature: surgical precision, minimal collateral damage to civilian targets, and complete destruction of military assets. The unknown pilot seemed to know exactly where to hit for maximum effect. More disturbing still, the attacks were escalating in both frequency and audacity. "Our intelligence says otherwise," Loktar replied, his voice carrying the weight of certainty that came from reviewing the data 17 times. "Ship identification confirms it. The vessel designation is Defiant, registered to one Alex Reed, former captain in the Earth Defense Force. Dishonorably discharged after protesting the pacification of the Kepler colonies." The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of the station's environmental systems. The Galactic Enforcement Council had spent centuries maintaining order through overwhelming force and superior technology. Individual resistance was crushed quickly and efficiently. Yet here sat evidence that challenged everything they believed about human capabilities. Admiral Vorth's aide, a nervous young officer named Kelm, stepped forward with a data pad. "Sir, we have more recent intelligence. The human has been intercepting our communications. Yesterday he broadcast a message across 17 systems calling for uprising against council rule." Loktar accepted the pad and activated the recording. Alex Reed's voice filled the chamber, calm, measured, completely unafraid. "People of the outer colonies, you are not alone. The council tells you resistance is futile, but I am living proof they lie. Every day they grow weaker. Every day we grow stronger. Freedom is not given. It is taken." The recording ended with coordinates for supply drops and instructions for civilian evacuation procedures. This human was not just attacking military targets. He was building a rebellion from nothing, using hope as his primary weapon. "How many ships do we need?" Admiral Vorth asked, his patience finally exhausted. 10? 20? I can have a battle group ready within 2 days." Loktar had been dreading this question. The analysis showed that conventional tactics would fail. Reed operated in areas with heavy gravitational interference, used hit-and-run tactics that nullified numerical advantages, and somehow anticipated council movements days in advance. Traditional fleet engagement would result in heavy losses for minimal gain. "The War Council recommends 50 ships, Loktar said quietly. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. 50 ships represented more firepower than had been deployed against the Antaron uprising 3 decades earlier. It was enough force to level a small moon or blockade an entire star system. Against one human pilot, it seemed like madness. "Admiral," Vorth slammed his fist on the table. 50 ships for one human. The other races will think we have lost our minds." "Better they think us excessive than weak," Loktar countered. "This Reed has become a symbol. If we fail to capture him quickly and decisively, every human colony will see it as proof that the council can be beaten. We cannot afford that perception." The vote was closer than expected, but the authorization passed. 50 of the council's finest warships would hunt down Alex Reed and bring him back alive for public trial and execution. It would be the largest enforcement action in recent memory, designed to crush human resistance permanently. Meanwhile, 3 sectors away, Alex Reed sat in the cramped cockpit of the Defiant, reviewing intercepted council transmissions. The ship looked unremarkable from the outside. A standard human corvette with some obvious modifications and what appeared to be battle damage. Inside, however, Reed had spent 18 months rebuilding every system using salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity. The main computer chimed softly as it finished decoding the latest council communications. Reed read the deployment orders with growing amazement. 50 ships. They were sending 50 ships after him. He should have been terrified, but instead he found himself smiling for the first time in months. Finally, he said to the empty cockpit, "They're taking this seriously." Reed had been preparing for this moment since his first attack on Outpost 7. Every strike had been calculated not just for immediate tactical advantage, but to provoke exactly this response. The Council's strength came from their reputation for invincibility. 50 ships to capture one human would either cement that reputation forever or destroy it completely. He activated the navigation system and input coordinates for the nebula fields, a dense region of stellar gases and gravitational anomalies that would serve as his battlefield. The journey would take 6 days, giving him time to make final preparations. The Council fleet would follow his trail there, expecting to corner him in what they believed was a dead end. They had no idea that Reed had been modifying the nebula for months, turning it into the most elaborate trap in galactic history. 50 ships would enter that cosmic maze hunting for one human. Reed intended to make sure not all of them came out. As the Defiant jumped to hyperspace, Reed began recording a message of his own. When the Council fleet arrived, they would find more than they bargained for. The hunt was about to begin, but Alex Reed had no intention of being the prey. The stakes were simple. Win, and human resistance would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Lose, and his people would remain slaves forever. Reed had made his choice long ago. The Council was about to learn what happened when they underestimated human determination. Space twisted and bent as 50 Council warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. The massive dreadnought Iron Talon led the fleet, its hull bristling with enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Admiral Vorth watched the tactical display from his command center, expecting to see a single human corvette trapped among the swirling gases of the nebula ahead. Instead, every screen in the fleet simultaneously activated with an incoming transmission. Alex Reed's face appeared on every monitor across all 50 ships, calm, confident, and completely unafraid, despite being outnumbered 50-1. "Welcome to the nebula fields," Reed said, his voice carrying clearly through the static. "I am Alex Reed of the ship Defiant, and I have terms for surrender." Admiral Vorth's aide looked confused. "Sir, did he say terms for our surrender?" Reed continued before anyone could respond. "You have entered my territory with hostile intent. I am prepared to accept your surrender under the following conditions. You will immediately withdraw from this system, release all human prisoners in Council custody, and cease military operations against civilian populations. You have 1 hour to comply." The transmission cut off, leaving the Council fleet in stunned silence. Admiral Vorth stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he had just witnessed. A single human pilot was demanding the surrender of the largest enforcement fleet ever assembled. "Find him," Vorth ordered. "Lock weapons and prepare to disable his engines. We will show this human the cost of his arrogance." The fleet's sensors swept the nebula, but found nothing. The dense stellar gases interfered with most scanning technologies, creating a maze of blind spots and false readings. Reed's ship had vanished somewhere in that cosmic fog, invisible to their instruments. "Sir," called the sensor operator, "I am detecting multiple energy signatures throughout the nebula. It appears the human has deployed some kind of network." Before Admiral Vorth could ask for clarification, space around them erupted in brilliant light. A section of the nebula roughly the size of a small moon simply vanished, replaced by expanding plasma and twisted metal. 5 Council scout ships that had been advancing ahead of the main fleet disappeared in an instant. Reed's voice returned to their communication system. "That was your demonstration. The entire nebula is rigged with antimatter charges and gravity wells. Any attempt to advance will trigger a chain reaction that will destroy everything within 50 light minutes. This is not a bluff." Admiral Vorth felt his confidence waver for the first time in decades. The explosion had registered as a Class 7 stellar event, more destructive than some supernovas. If Reed could trigger that level of destruction at will, the entire fleet was trapped in a minefield of unimaginable proportions. Deploy stealth ships, Vorth ordered quietly. Silent approach, full spectrum dampeners. If this human wants to play games, we will show him what real warfare looks like. 8 stealth corvettes detached from the main fleet and began their approach using minimum power and advanced cloaking technology. Their crews were the Council's elite specialists, trained to infiltrate and capture high-value targets without detection. Against a single human in a modified cargo ship, they should have been completely invisible. They made it exactly 12 minutes before Reed struck again. The first stealth ship simply stopped responding to communications. Its escort found the HFY vessel drifting with all systems offline and the crew unconscious. The second ship reported sensor ghosts moving through the nebula before its transmission cut to static. The third managed to send a brief emergency signal about impossible gravity readings before vanishing entirely. Reed had somehow detected every stealth approach and neutralized them without revealing his own position. Worse, he was using their own technology against them. The recovered stealth ships had been stripped of their cloaking systems and weapons, then set adrift as warnings. He is toying with us, Admiral Vorth realized with growing horror. This human knows we are coming, before we move. The tactical situation was unlike anything in Council military history. Their enemy controlled the battlefield completely, could strike anywhere without warning, and seemed to anticipate their every move. Standard fleet tactics meant nothing in this environment. Reed's next attack came from an impossible angle. The Defiant appeared briefly on their sensors, fired a spread of missiles at the fleet's supply ships, then vanished again before return fire could be coordinated. The missiles were not standard weapons. They carried some kind of gravitational warhead that created temporary black holes on impact. 3 supply ships were pulled into microscopic event horizons and crushed to the size of marbles. The remaining fleet watched in stunned silence as their vessels were compressed into points of infinite density by human technology they did not understand. "How is this possible?" whispered Captain Nex of the destroyer, Windcutter. "Humans do not possess gravity weapons." Admiral Vorth studied the tactical display with growing unease. Reed was not just fighting them, he was demonstrating capabilities that should have been impossible with human technology. Each attack revealed new weapons, new tactics, and new levels of preparation that suggested months or even years of planning. The fleet tried to retreat to safer distance, only to discover that Reed had somehow mined their exit routes. Attempts to call for reinforcements failed as their communications were being jammed by sources they could not locate. They were trapped in the nebula with a human who seemed to control the very laws of physics within its boundaries. As the first day of the battle ended, Admiral Vorth faced an impossible reality. His 50-ship fleet, the pride of the Council Navy, was being systematically destroyed by a single human pilot in a modified corvette. 8 ships were already lost, and they had not even seen their enemy clearly. Reed transmitted one final message as artificial night fell across the nebula. "I told you this was my territory. Tomorrow you will learn what that truly means. Sleep well, Admiral. You will need your rest." The transmission ended, leaving the Council fleet alone in the dark with their fears and the growing certainty that they had walked into a trap that would define the future of human resistance across the galaxy. The nightmare began at 0347 ship time, when the destroyer Swift Strike reported contact with enemy forces. Captain Nex responded immediately, bringing her ship Windcutter and 2 escorts to support what should have been a routine engagement. They arrived to find the Swift Strike firing wildly into empty space at targets that existed only on their sensors. Contacts bearing 27 Mark IV, the Swift Strike's commander reported over increasingly frantic communications. Multiple small craft fast attack pattern, requesting immediate support. But there was nothing there. Captain Nex's sensors showed empty space where the Swift Strike claimed to be engaging enemy fighters. The destroyer continued firing until its weapons overheated, then reported successful destruction of 6 enemy vessels that had never existed. Psychological warfare, Nex realized with growing dread. Reed was not just attacking their ships. He was attacking their minds. The human had spent months preparing the nebula, and now the Council fleet was discovering the true scope of his preparations. Hidden throughout the stellar gases were thousands of sensor relays, signal generators, and gravitational manipulators that created false readings and phantom contacts. Ships found themselves chasing ghost signatures through corridors that led nowhere, firing at enemies that vanished the moment they were targeted. Admiral Vorth tried to maintain formation, but the nebula itself seemed to be working against them. Navigation became impossible as spatial distortions created maze-like passages between clouds of stellar debris. Ships that should have been minutes apart found themselves separated by hours of travel time. The fleet began to fragment despite desperate attempts to stay together. Reed struck again during the confusion. The heavy cruiser Dominator reported engine problems and fell behind the main group. When escorts doubled back to assist, they found the ship drifting with all crew unconscious and its main computer displaying a simple message: "You are in my house now." The Dominator's weapons had been methodically disabled, its communication array destroyed, and its navigation computer wiped clean. Most disturbing of all, its sensor logs showed no record of any attack. The crew had simply collapsed at their end stations as if overcome by some invisible force. "Gas attack," suggested the fleet medical officer. "Some kind of neural toxin in the nebula itself." But environmental scans showed nothing harmful in the surrounding space. The crew of the Dominator had been rendered unconscious by methods the Council could not detect or understand. They were fighting an enemy who could strike without warning, without trace, and without being seen. Captain Nex found herself assigned to lead a battle group deeper into the nebula, tasked with locating Reed's base of operations. The mission should have been simple: follow the energy signatures to their source and destroy whatever installation the human was using as his command center. Instead, she led her ships into a three-dimensional maze where the laws of physics seemed to bend at Reed's will. Gravity fields appeared and disappeared without warning, pulling ships off course or crushing them against invisible barriers. Stellar gases that looked harmless on sensors turned out to be superheated plasma that could melt hull armor in seconds. "This is impossible," her navigator reported after the third attempt to find a clear path forward. "The gravitational readings make no sense. Space itself is folded into patterns I have never seen." Reed was using the nebula's natural phenomena as weapons, but more than that, he was manipulating them with technology that should not have existed. Gravity wells appeared precisely where ships would be moments later, as if the human could predict their movements with perfect accuracy. The wind cutter barely escaped when a section of space collapsed into a temporary black hole directly in their path. The destroyer Iron Will was not so fortunate. Captain Nex watched in horror as her escort ship was stretched and compressed by gravitational forces until it resembled twisted metal sculpture rather than a warship. Reed's voice echoed through the comm systems again, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "You are learning the first lesson of warfare. Know your battlefield. I have been preparing this place for 18 months. Every gas cloud, every gravitational anomaly, every piece of debris has been positioned for maximum tactical advantage." The human was not just hiding in the nebula. He had transformed it into the most elaborate weapon in galactic history. Every movement the Council fleet made played into his strategy. They were not hunting him. They were dancing to music only he could hear. Admiral Vorth watched his tactical display with growing desperation as more ships reported problems. The heavy cruiser, Thunderstrike, collided with invisible barriers that appeared to be solid matter, but registered as empty space. The destroyer Quicksilver found itself trapped in a gravity loop, circling the same point in space for hours, despite full engine power. Most disturbing of all were the reports of equipment failure. Weapon systems shut down at critical moments. Navigation computers provided false information that led ships into danger. Communication arrays began broadcasting human music instead of tactical data. Reed was somehow infiltrating their technology and turning it against them. "He has been inside our systems from the beginning," the fleet's chief engineer reported with barely controlled panic. "Every ship shows signs of intrusion dating back weeks. Our own computers have been working for him." The psychological impact was devastating. Crews began to doubt their instruments, their officers, and eventually themselves. Some ships reported mutinies as personnel refused orders that might lead them into Reed's traps. Others simply went silent, disappearing into the nebula without explanation. Captain Nex felt her own sanity beginning to crack as her ship was stalked through the maze by an enemy she could not see. Sensor contacts appeared and vanished like ghosts. Her weapons fired at targets that existed only in her imagination. The nebula itself seemed alive, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. On the fourth day, Reed revealed the true scope of his strategy. 7 council ships were pursuing what they believed to be his corvette through a narrow passage between gas clouds. They had finally cornered their enemy and prepared for the killing blow that would end this nightmare. The target turned out to be a hologram projected by hidden generators. As the ships realized their mistake, the passage collapsed behind them. Not from gravitational forces, but from carefully placed explosive charges that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The 7 ships found themselves trapped in a pocket of space barely large enough to contain them. Reed's real ship appeared above them, dropping through layers of gas like a predator descending on trapped prey. The Defiant looked different. Now, larger, more angular, bristling with weapons that definitely were not standard human technology. The human had been rebuilding his ship throughout the battle using salvaged council equipment. The engagement lasted exactly 37 seconds. Reed's modified weapons cut through council shields as if they did not exist. His ship moved through the confined space with impossible agility, striking from angles that should have been blocked by the debris field he had created. 7 warships were reduced to glowing wreckage before they could coordinate a response. As Captain Nex watched the tactical display update with 7 more red markers, she finally understood the true nature of their situation. They were not fighting a human pilot in the nebula. They were fighting the nebula itself, shaped and directed by human intelligence into something that existed purely to destroy council ships. Admiral Vorth's voice came over the fleet communications, hollow with defeat. All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance. We need to reassess our approach. But there was no safe distance in Alex Reed's domain. The human had spent months turning this region of space into the most perfect killing ground ever created. The Council had sent 50 ships to capture 1 human, and now they were trapped in a maze with no exit, hunted by an enemy who controlled every aspect of their environment. The hunt had become a slaughter, and they were no longer the hunters. Desperation had a particular smell aboard the Iron Talon, and Admiral Vorth could taste it in the recycled air of his command center. 30 ships lost to 1 human pilot. 30 crews dead or missing in a nebula that had become their tomb. The remaining 20 vessels of his once mighty fleet huddled together at the edge of the maze, their crews on the verge of mutiny. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from 6 more ships," reported his communications officer, a young female named Tess, whose hands shook as she worked her console. "Their captains are requesting permission to withdraw from the engagement. Soon." Vorth stared at the tactical display where red markers outnumbered green by an increasingly humiliating margin. Each lost ship represented hundreds of lives and decades of military reputation. The Council would not forgive this failure, but continuing would only make the disaster worse. "Denied," he said through clenched teeth. "We finished this today." The Admiral activated the fleet-wide communication system and addressed his remaining commanders with words he hoped would restore their fighting spirit. "We have allowed ourselves to be terrorized by parlor tricks and human cleverness. This ends now. Prepare quantum torpedoes for full-scale bombardment. We will obliterate this entire nebula and the terrorist hiding within it." The order sent shockwaves through the fleet. Quantum torpedoes were weapons of mass destruction, capable of unraveling matter at the subatomic level. Using them would turn the nebula into an expanding ball of pure energy that would sterilize everything within 100 light years. It was genocide on a stellar scale. "Sir?" Captain Nex's voice crackled over the communication system from her position aboard the wind cutter. "That level of destruction will be visible from 17 inhabited systems. The political consequences will be handled by politicians," Vorth cut her off. "Our job is to eliminate the threat. If we cannot capture this human, we will ensure he never threatens Council authority again." Unknown to the Admiral, Reed had been monitoring their communications since the battle began. Aboard the Defiant, Now hidden deep within the nebula's most dangerous section, the human pilot listened to the Council's final gambit with something approaching satisfaction. "Quantum torpedoes," he said to his ship's computer. "They are more desperate than I expected." Reed had anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly. The antimatter charges he had mentioned were real, but their positions were not where he had claimed. Instead of random placement throughout the nebula, he had spent months positioning them in a carefully calculated pattern, designed to channel and amplify any large-scale energy release. The quantum torpedoes launched from 20 Council ships, simultaneously, each weapon capable of destroying a small moon. They streaked through space toward the nebula's center, where sensors indicated the highest concentration of Reed's energy signatures. Admiral Vorth watched their progress with grim satisfaction, knowing that nothing could survive the complete molecular breakdown these weapons would cause. The torpedoes detonated exactly as planned, releasing enough energy to briefly outshine the system's star. Space itself seemed to tear apart as quantum fields collapsed and reformed in chaotic patterns. Any normal target would have been reduced to its component atoms in microseconds. But Reed had turned the Council's ultimate weapon into his own. The antimatter charges detonated in sequence, not to add to the destruction but to redirect it. The expanding sphere of quantum energy struck his carefully positioned gravity wells, and was funneled into streams of pure annihilation that shot outward, in precisely calculated directions. The remaining Council ships found themselves facing something unprecedented in galactic warfare, a weaponized stellar explosion under human control. Beams of quantum fire lanced out from the nebula's heart, striking ships that should have been safely beyond the weapon's range. The energy streams moved like living things, bending around obstacles and seeking targets with predatory intelligence. Admiral Vorth watched in horror as his own ultimate attack was turned against him. The destroyer's storm front vanished in a burst of quantum fire. The cruiser Ironhammer tried to retreat but was caught by a pursuing energy beam that unraveled its hull molecule by molecule. 5 more ships died in the first minute after detonation. "Impossible," Vorth whispered as his tactical display updated with more losses. "No one can control quantum energy after release. The physics do not allow it." Reed's voice filled the communication channels, calm and unhurried, despite orchestrating destruction on a cosmic scale. "Your mistake, Admiral, is thinking that humans follow the same rules as everyone else. We do not accept that something is impossible. We find a way to make it work." The Defiant emerged from the expanding chaos like a shark rising from blood-stained water. The ship looked even more alien, now its hull modified with Council technology, and what appeared to be components salvaged from the nebula itself. Reed had not just survived the quantum bombardment. He had used it to reveal the positions of every remaining Council vessel. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. Reed's modified ship moved through the quantum storm as if the lethal energy was harmless mist. His weapons, now clearly of hybrid human-alien design, cut through Council shields and armor with contemptuous ease. The corvette's swift arrow lasted 6 seconds. The destroyer Nightblade managed to fire twice before being reduced to glowing debris. Captain Nex found herself commanding the desperate rearguard action as the fleet attempted to retreat from what had become a slaughter. The Wind Cutter and 3 escort ships tried to provide covering fire for the larger vessels, but Reed seemed to anticipate every tactical decision before it was made. "He is not just faster than us," she reported to Admiral Vorth as another escort vanished from her sensors. "He is fighting the battle he wants to fight while we react to moves he made hours ago." The truth was even worse than she realized. Reed had spent the entire engagement herding the Council fleet into the exact positions he needed for his final trap. Every attack, every retreat, every tactical decision had been guided by his hidden influence. The Admiral's quantum torpedo bombardment had not been a desperate gambit. It had been the culmination of Reed's strategy from the very beginning. As the expanding wall of quantum fire began to subside, only one Council ship remained functional. The Iron Talon drifted helpless in space, its engines destroyed and life support failing. Admiral Vorth sat in his command chair surrounded by dead consoles and the bodies of his crew, finally understanding the true scope of his defeat. Reed's ship appeared on their view screen, moving with predatory grace through the debris field that had once been the Council's most powerful fleet. The human pilot opened a communication channel and looked directly at the Admiral, with eyes that showed no mercy and no satisfaction, only the cold calculation of someone who had just completed a necessary task. 49 ships destroyed, Admiral. Your flagship is the only survivor, and that is intentional. You have a message to carry back to the Council. Reed paused, letting the magnitude of the defeat sink in. Tell them that this was just the beginning. Every human colony they have oppressed, every freedom they have denied, every life they have taken, all of it will be answered. The rebellion starts now. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Vorth alone with the wreckage of his career and the terrible knowledge that he had just witnessed the birth of something that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. The Council had sent 50 ships to capture one human. They had lost everything except the messenger needed to carry news of their humiliation back home. Emergency lights cast sickly yellow shadows across the bridge of the Iron Talon as Admiral Vorth waited for death in the silence of space. His flagship drifted powerless among the debris of his fleet, life support systems failing and hull breaches, sealed with whatever materials the surviving crew could find. They had perhaps 2 hours of breathable air remaining. The sound of something attaching to the outer hull made everyone freeze. Cutting tools began working through the emergency airlock, sending vibrations through the ship's damaged frame. Someone was boarding them, and they all knew who it would be. Alex Reed entered the bridge alone, moving with the easy confidence of someone completely in control of the situation. He wore a simple flight suit and carried no visible weapons. Yet, every Council officer in the room instinctively stepped back. The human looked around the destroyed command center with what might have been sympathy before focusing on Admiral Vorth. Your crew is being evacuated to escape pods, Reed said without preamble. They will be picked up by rescue ships in approximately 4 hours. You and I need to have a conversation. Vorth studied the human who had just destroyed the most powerful military force the Council had ever assembled. Reed appeared younger than expected, perhaps 30 standard years, with the kind of calm competence that came from surviving impossible situations. There was nothing obviously threatening about him, which somehow made him more terrifying. Have you come to gloat over your victory? Vorth asked, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. No, Reed replied, settling into one of the functional chairs. I came to collect your database and send a message. The victory was never the point. The human produced a data storage device and began interfacing it with the ship's main computer. Vorth watched helplessly as 18 months of Council intelligence flowed into enemy hands. Fleet movements, base locations, supply routes, military capabilities, and classified information that could cripple their entire operation. You realize this means war, Vorth said as Reed worked. The Council will not allow this attack to go unanswered. They will send everything they have. Reed paused in his data extraction and looked directly at the Admiral. They already did. 50 ships was your everything, and it was not enough. The balance of power in this galaxy just shifted permanently. As the data transfer completed, Reed activated the ship's communication system and began recording a message using the Admiral's own command codes. The recording would be transmitted across every Council frequency, with the full authority of the fleet flagship. Citizens of the Galactic Enforcement Council, Reed began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had just proven his point with overwhelming force. I am Alex Reed, commander of the human resistance vessel Defiant. Today your leadership sent 50 warships to capture me. They lost all of them. Reed gestured to the view screen where the debris field stretched beyond visual range. Twisted metal and frozen atmosphere clouds marked the graves of 49 Council vessels and their crews. The scope of destruction was almost too large to comprehend. This was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Your Council believes that superior numbers and advanced technology make them invincible. They are wrong. Every ship they sent was defeated by human ingenuity, determination, and the simple refusal to accept that freedom cannot be won. The recording paused as Reed accessed the captured intelligence data, displaying classified documents that revealed the true extent of Council military operations, base locations, troop strengths, supply lines, everything needed to plan a systematic campaign against their infrastructure. But this is not a message of revenge, Reed continued. It is an offer. The coordinates you are about to receive show the locations of 12 human resistance cells throughout Council space. Each one is equipped with technology and tactics similar to what you witnessed today. Your choice is simple. Withdraw from human colonies and allow us to govern ourselves, or face the consequences of continued oppression. Admiral Vorth felt his blood turn to ice as the implications became clear. Reed had not been operating alone. The single ship that had just destroyed 50 vessels was part of a larger network, and now every cell would have access to the captured Council intelligence. The rebellion you feared has already begun, Reed said, looking directly into the recording device. It started the moment you decided that human freedom was negotiable. Every colony you have pacified, every voice you have silenced, every life you have crushed in the name of order, all of it created the anger that drives us now. The humans stood and walked to the view screen where the debris field continued to expand. Your leaders will tell you that this was a fluke, that one lucky human cannot challenge galactic order. They will send more ships, make more threats, promise that overwhelming force will restore their authority. Reed turned back to the camera with a smile that held no warmth. Let them try. Today you learned what happens when the oppressed refuse to stay oppressed. Tomorrow you will learn what happens when that refusal spreads across 1,000 worlds. The recording ended, but Reed was not finished. He activated the ship's navigation computer and began uploading new data. Star charts showing jump routes to hidden bases, communication frequencies for coordinating resistance activities, and detailed tactical information on Council military weaknesses. Why are you giving me this? Admiral Vorth asked as he watched his enemy hand over intelligence that could be used against human forces. Because it does not matter anymore, Reed replied simply. By the time you return to Council space, this information will be obsolete. We have been planning this moment for 2 years. Your fleet was not just defeated, it was studied. Every weapon, every tactic, every system failure has been analyzed and cataloged. Reed finished his work and prepared to leave, but paused at the airlock hatch. Admiral, you have served your purpose. You came here to capture a single human and end our resistance. Instead, you provided the demonstration that will inspire millions of humans across the galaxy to take up arms against Council rule. Vorth watched through the view screen as Reed's ship departed, leaving him alone with a crippled flagship and the terrible knowledge of what he had unleashed. The Defiant accelerated away from the debris field and vanished into hyperspace, carrying its pilot toward a rendezvous that would change the course of galactic history. 3 days later, Reed arrived at the hidden coordinates where a small fleet waited in the shadow of a dead star. 12 ships hung in perfect formation, each one a modified human vessel bristling with hybrid technology. Their crews had been monitoring Council communications and preparing for this moment since the battle began. Captain Maya Cross waited aboard. The command ship Liberation, reviewing the intelligence data Reed had captured with barely contained excitement. The Council's complete military database was spread across her screens like a detailed map of enemy territory. Base locations, patrol schedules, supply convoys, communication codes, everything needed to wage effective guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. 50 ships, she said as Reed entered the briefing room. You actually managed to destroy 50 ships. The number was never important, Reed replied, taking his seat at the conference table. What matters is what comes next. Every human colony will have heard about this victory within a week. The Council's reputation for invincibility is broken forever. Around the table sat the commanders of the other resistance cells, former military, officers, merchant captains, miners who had learned to fight when their worlds were strip-mined for Council profit. Each one represented hundreds of humans ready to die for freedom, and now they had the intelligence and inspiration needed to make their deaths count. The Council will respond with even more force, warned Captain Cross. They cannot allow this precedent to stand. Reed nodded, accessing the tactical displays that showed Council fleet positions across known space. They will try, But now they know they are fighting an actual war, not just suppressing scattered resistance. Every ship they send against us is a ship not available for garrison duty. Every victory we achieve will inspire 10 more cells to take up arms. The meeting continued for hours as they planned the next phase of operations. Supply raids to capture, more advanced technology, communication networks to coordinate between cells, recruitment drives on worlds where humans lived under council occupation. Most importantly, they planned how to use the psychological impact of Reed's victory to maximum advantage. As the conference ended and the ships prepared to scatter to their new assignments, Reed stood alone on the observation deck of the Liberation and watched the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights were human colonies waiting for liberation, council bases that would soon face attack, and billions of people who would learn that oppression was not permanent. The council had sent 50 ships to capture a single human. They had lost all of them, but more than that, they had lost the fear that kept their empire stable. The galaxy would never be the same, and Reed intended to make sure the change favored those who valued freedom over order. The Rebellion was no longer coming, it had arrived.